We'll move to the morning keynote now with Kathleen Edge. Many of you have probably read the book called Good to Great. It's been on charts since 2001. Basically, if you haven't, it's a comparison of how some companies make a leap to greatness over time, while a competitor of similar size at the beginning falters. If you haven't read it, well, I can sum up the moral of the book in 3 words: people, people, people. To kick off the Georgia Manufacturing Summit this year, we're going to focus on people. Kathleen Edge is the head of human resources at Southwire. She's responsible for talent strategy, communications, and HR for Southwire's 7,000 employees. So that basically means recruiting, succession planning, training, development, employee and labor relations, compensation, benefits. That's all. Native of San Diego, an alum of the University of Alabama, bachelor's in business administration, and a master's in accounting. For fun, and we all got to have fun, she rides her Harley through the Georgia mountains. And Southwire, privately held, based in Carrollton, manufactures electrical wire, cable, and cord, $5 billion in sales. People, the right people, your number one asset. Please welcome Kathleen Edge.
Good morning. I have to bring my bottle of water. I apologize for my voice. As you heard, I'm an Alabama alumni, and I did go to the Texas A&M game and had a really good time this weekend. Little bit of my voice since we took us till the middle of the third quarter to take control of the game, and we're not used to that in Alabama right now. So first thing I want to do is to thank the Georgia Manufacturing Alliance for allowing us at Southwire to come share our story. We are a product of learning from others, and we believe in giving back to others of what we've figured out on our own that we think works. So the first thing I want to say is to thank you that this is not my story, Kathleen Edge. This is Southwire's story and the story of a collection of manufacturers that we learned from. So the first thing I want to say is I am honored here to be in front of fellow manufacturing leaders. Do you know how cool our jobs are? Do you really know how cool it is? We get to make something tangible each and every day. I have worked with teams to make diapers and tampons and toilet paper and paper towels. I shifted industries, and I learned how to make bricks and pavers and fabricate glass, went into a quarry mine to get limestone for asphalt and concrete. I then had a lot of fun energizing boats and cars and motorcycles to manufacture batteries. And I'm having the most fun of all working with the Southwire family to manufacture wire and cable to bring power to our lives. We make everyday life easier. When you turn on that light switch, the lights come on because of us. When you shut that door and hit the button, your dishes get washed because of us. When you go to that smartphone, which is our new brain because nobody knows how to think of anything, we have to Google it. We power your data plan to get the answer to your phone. Who wouldn't want to get up and do that each and every day? And you can tell I'm a bit passionate about manufacturing. I've been in the manufacturing sector for 25 years, and I couldn't imagine working anywhere else. And it's not because of the products I just listed for you. It's because of the people I get to work with each and every day. It's the people that work their 8s and their 10s and their 12s. It's the people that worked overtime when our manufacturing facility flooded to help us clean out the facility, get the equipment up and running to service our customers and allow people to come to work every day. It's the people that stood beside me in Baton Rouge to give out basic necessities to thousands of families impacted by the floods. It's the people that collect the toys for the children at Christmas. It's the people that show up at our electronic recycling so the electronics don't end up in the landfill. If you don't get it yet, it's not about the products we make. It's about how we go about making the products. And when we figure that out, that's the true gold in manufacturing. I'm going to switch a little bit over, and I want to share with you a little bit about Southwire before I get into the challenges we as manufacturers face. We have challenges that are right in front of us now and will be facing for decades to come. So let me tell you a little bit about Southwire, and then I can tell you how we're trying to address the different challenges that we face. We come from very humble beginnings. Roy Richards Sr. was our founder of Southwire, and he had a mere mission to bring electricity to his grandmother's home. We celebrated our 65th anniversary last year. We have our longest tenured employee still working with us. Miss Linda McWhorter has been with us for 56 years. That tells you a lot. We are a privately held company. We are owned today by 5 of the 7 children of our founder. At Southwire, if you look at us modern age, we are 7,500 employees across North America and in some international locations. We have 30 manufacturing facilities, 10 distribution centers. We operate across 2 businesses. We have the constructions, system and solutions business, focuses on residential and non-residential markets. We have a power systems and solutions group that focuses on our utility and OEM markets. And today, we are North America's largest wire and cable manufacturer with the mission to become a global company. At the same time, our shareholders have a long-term strategy. They have set the mission of the family to celebrate 100 years as a privately held company. They have an expectation of management to operate with a triple bottom line mindset. It's the economics, it's the environmental, and it's the social. And we look at that as our sustainable strategy. And over 10 years ago, Southwire started out and said, we need to have a sustainable business strategy. And we did it for the purpose of mitigating risk of environmental concerns. We have now transitioned over the last 10 years where sustainable mindset is a fabric of everything we do in our company. It's become part of our brand. We have now stepped back and said, what is the next 10 years going to be? And we've set a mission over the next 10 years to become a social capital company that builds and produces sustainable products that improve the lives of Americans. We look at it, when you see this imagery, we look at sustainability as a very integrated approach. We need to grow green on the impact we have on the environment. We need to live well, and that is the health, safety, and I mean the overall well-being of our employees. We need to give back to the communities in which we operate. We need to do right by our customers. We need to do right by our shareholders. We need to do right by our employees, and we need to do right by our communities. And that leads to building worth. So if you get the others in front of you right, it will deliver to building worth for the shareholders. So we are very blessed that we have shareholders that believe in the long term. It allows us to do some things a little differently. Because prior to Southwire, I spent over 20 years in publicly held companies, and I understand the challenges that happen when you have this anonymous shareholder looking at you for quarterly returns versus sitting in front of the shareholder, and you're like, whoa, I have a personal relationship, and it changes your responsibility. This year, we celebrated a 1-year anniversary of our new CEO, Mr. Richard Stinson, that took the helm last year. He is the 4th CEO in our company's history. He came to us with 33 years in the electrical industry. He spent the first 100 days not making any decisions. He spent time walking the floors of our manufacturing facilities, our warehouses. He met with our customers. He did focus groups with groups of employees. He met with our community leaders. He met with the leaders of Southwire, and then said, I think we got it. We want to go from good to great. This isn't a turnaround. This isn't a fixer-upper, but what can we do to even become better? And he's laid out these 3 strategies. And we need to focus on accelerating our growth, and that's where sustainability comes in. We want to do it through sustainable products. We also need to drive operational excellence. Part of the challenges you're going to hear me talk about today, we've grown pretty fast in the last 5 to 7 years. Some of our foundation isn't ready to support a broad global company, and we need to prepare for that. So to do that, we have to build organization capability. And that's what I'm going to talk to you today about, is building organization capability. Before I get into the story, I want to ask you a question. I'm going to speak to you about sustainable engagement. How do you bring the hearts and minds of employees to work every day, not just their bodies? And I want you to answer this question for yourself. Many of us say that people are our greatest asset. But do your actions as leaders convey that message each and every day? Because they're watching. I learned that early on. I didn't realize that everybody's watching. I mean, they know if my car's parked in the loft, whether I'm in Carrollton. They know if I'm at Little Hawaiian having lunch. They know if I'm having a glass of wine at the Italian place. And if I have a smile, if I don't have a smile. And especially when you're HR, if you're coming out with a smile, they really step back. So you're like, oh, HR is coming in the room and she's not looking happy today. And my team has a code, and I'm called the tornado in the corner. And they're open enough to tell me, and they come in the morning, and the first person that meets with me, they send out the word of whether I'm an F3 or an F5 that day. So got to watch out a little bit for that. But before I get into what Southwire is doing and what we've learned from other companies and we're putting in place in our company, I want to talk about the challenges we all face as manufacturers. These are the challenges that lie ahead, and you can try to fight them, you can try to deny them, you can try to argue with them, or you can just let it run over you like a bus. We've chosen to try to understand them and adjust our strategy accordingly. And there are two significant challenges we're facing as manufacturers. The first one is the demographic shift we are undergoing as Americans. And this is what the Pew Research Group refers to as the next America. And if you haven't read the book, if you like statistics, it's a really good read. But if you're like, I'm one that watched the video. There's a great website on it. Because the book, about halfway through, I'm like, wow, I'm back in statistics. And Lord knows why I got an accounting degree and I'm in HR. But that's another story for another time. But what's happening in America is there's two demographic shifts that are happening simultaneously. We're graying as a nation, and the racial makeup is changing. And if you went through any one of these by itself, it would be significant in the era by itself. Both are happening simultaneously. And what are we as manufacturing doing to address that? And I'll talk to you that in a little bit more detail. The second, which many of us have talked about in been different forums and roundtable discussions, is the skill gap shortage. But interestingly enough, the skill gap shortage isn't anything new. We talked about this in the 90s. And I can say that because I've been in manufacturing for 25 years. We've been talking about it for 25 years. The problem was we still were not at a scarcity so we could talk about it. Now we're facing a scarcity of talent. We have to do something about it. But in the 90s, the Center for Education and the Economy noted that we're going to have a skill gap shortage in 20 years. And how did this happen? If you go back to the 80s, and it persisted into the 90s, we went through a re-engineering phase, and everybody wanted to get to their core excellence and eliminated non-core functions, abolished apprenticeship programs because it was seen as an expense. So we're going to talk about the repercussions of that. Okay, so let me come back to the next America. I'm going to start with fancy word demographers. How many people know what a demographer is? Did you know you can make money at that? I don't know what the degree is, but a demographer. For as long as human history, demographers have depicted the age of our population using this graphic. And what you see, it's a fancy graphic, but every bar represents 5 years. So the bottom bar is the percentage of the population that is 0 to 4 years old. The top bar is anybody over 85 and everything in between. And for as long as history, this has been a triangle or close to a trapezoid, where you had the largest population was the youth, and the smallest population was those that were aging over 85. I want you to watch what happens to this demographic over a 100-year period. It turns into a rectangle. We're going to have as many people over 85 as we have under 5. Think about the pressures and shifts that changes family dynamics. It impacts our pocketbook. It's going to impact our political landscape. It's going to impact our social systems. It is going to put stress on families, governments, and companies. And you have to think about, what is retirement age? How do we transition people out? What do we do for retirement? Because retirement's different. And this is great news if you think about it for all of us. We get to live longer. It's even greater news because part of this is happening because of the health. You can live longer. We also have lower birth rates. At the same time, we'll have a smaller population because we have scarce resources. So there is good news. But as you know, we all love change, as long as it's not happening to me. So I love to sit in the executives and we talk about all the changes we're going to do in the organization, and then I come in and I get to talk about benefit changes and retirement changes, and all of a sudden, ooh, wait, whoa, this is impacting me. So we have to, that transition between what was and what is always the hardest period in our lifetime. We're going to get to see that. So you have to think about, as a manufacturer, what are you doing about that? So not only do we have to deal with the grain, and I pay a lot of money so you don't see the gray right now, we have to deal with the demographic shift in our society. We are becoming majority non-white. And what does that mean? If you look back at 1960, 85% of our population was Caucasian white. If you forecast and look at 2060, it goes to 43%. We will have much more of a rainbow of a population. And why is that? Think back to the 18th and 19th century. Who were the immigrants? Europeans. We all come over white. The racial divides were not skin color. The racial divides were, if I'm an Italian woman, I do not bring a Jewish boy home. If I'm an Irish Catholic son, I don't bring a Jewish girl home. So the racial divides back, when you look back, was about the country from which you came from, because the skin color was the same. Now as you shift in the immigration that's about to come, 82% of the immigration was from Europe. It'll now be 12%. So your immigration is coming from Central America, South America, and Mexico. And 3 in 10 are Asians. So immigration is driving this racial change. And that's going to have implications on the workplace and the environment of which we create. But the good news is, immigration is what helped this country become what it is. And the world that we have lived in, and you see in the middle of that graphic, is an outlier. This company has been predominantly made up of immigrants, and typically, when you look at it, it's immigrants and their children have made up over 35% of the population for a long time. When you look into the future, we're going to go back to that. What's happened in the 20th century is an outlier. It's not the norm for this country. It's not how this country was founded. It's not how the capitalism is built. What's the good news about immigrants? Immigrants are strivers. Immigrants are optimists. Immigrants have large families, and we need more people. So by nature, immigration isn't something to go, whoa. Now the how, we're not going to get into the politics. It's happening. What are you as a company doing about what's happening? Let's fast forward to the skill gap shortage. Many of you may have seen this. The skill gap shortage is real. In 2011 alone, 600,000 manufacturing jobs went unfilled. Over the next decade, we expect to need 3.5 million jobs. Baby boomers, if you don't know the statistics, are retiring at a rate of 10,000 every day. 10,000 a day in the US are retiring, baby boomers. We expect to have a skill gap shortage over the next 10 years of 2 million jobs going unfilled. And we have to think about that. For every job in manufacturing creates 2.5 jobs in local goods and services. It's a huge impact to the economy. And we need to understand that. At the same time, we are facing a perception issue in manufacturing. So we had the Manufacturing Institute and Deloitte partnered, and they've done a study over the last 6 years of what is the perception of manufacturing. And the perception in America is manufacturing is vital to our economy. It's a very important industry, hands down. Flip of the coin. Only 37% of those respondents would encourage their children to have a career in manufacturing. 37%. We have a skill gap shortage, and only a third of people really want their children to work in our industry. What are we doing? We have to do something different. I told you, when you get in the industry, so when they looked at the study, those that are in the industry or familiar with the industry were 2 times as likely to encourage our children to go into manufacturing. So if you really want to address the skill gap shortage, you're going to have to address the gender gap shortage. Half the population is made up of women. Half of the professional managers in corporate America is over 50% women, and we only have 24% women in manufacturing. My company, we only have 20. So we are having to address it. It's a challenge we all have, but if you really want to address the skill gap, you need to address the gender gap. So let me tell you a little bit about Southwire, because you may be thinking, great, you told us all this great news, we're getting old, more diversity, now I got to hire women, what are you going to do about it? It's real, guys. I've been there. I have worked for all my life in manufacturing, couldn't imagine anything else as I told you. There is not one thing you can do. There is not one thing you can do. This is a tangled web of complexities that requires a huge strategic shift in how we develop the workforce and what employment experience are you cultivating in your company. So if you can get them in the door, do they like it once they get there? And so at Southwire, when we talk about building organization capability, we're very laser focused. And we are focused on engaging our employees. We are focused on investing in our talent. We need to get ready for growth, and we know that we're not ready for growth, so we have to get ready. We don't have all the capabilities. And we understand, I'm going to talk to you about it, it has to do with emotional intelligence and adaptability. How many of you have been in there and talked about the good old days? We used to do it like this, and it was so much better like this. It was better when Mike Wiggins was there. It was better than Wayne McAmis was there. It was better when Roy Richards Jr. was there. But I can tell you that's not when they said that when they were there. It's always the good old days when you're looking back, but when you're in it, it doesn't feel like the good old days. So think about that. We need adaptability and emotional intelligence, and I'm going to talk to you about what we're trying to do at Southwire, what we've learned from other companies, and what we figured out ourselves that we're sharing openly. And we're going to start with engagement. With engagement, I have the question. We ask ourselves at Southwire, what type of environment are we creating? We ask ourselves at Southwire, what do the folks look like when they're coming in on shift? I have the blessing to work in our corporate office in Carrollton, and it's connected directly to our very first manufacturing plant. So I try a couple nights to leave after 7 or leave right at 7 because that's our shift change. What do your folks look, what's the look on their face when they're coming to work? When they come through our turnstile at our security area, what does their face look like? When they're leaving, what are they talking about? Are you walking a mile in their shoes, or are you looking at it through your lens? Because diversity and inclusivity is about multiple realities. It's not one's right or wrong. Do you understand all the realities of people they're dealing with? And I'm a geek by nature. I watch C-SPAN, and I watched the testimony and the testifying of the Wells Fargo CEO in front of the Senate Finance Committee and in front of the Congress. As an HR professional, if anybody's here from HR, watch it. It is the scariest thing you'll ever see. How did over 5,000 employees commit fraud? And he's saying it's only 2% of his population. I'm like, it's 5,000 freaking people. It wasn't 5, it wasn't 50, it was 5,000. And that's all that we know. It wasn't that the CEO's not a good man. It wasn't that the CEO didn't come from good values. The culture that was cultivated was not a healthy culture. So my question I have for you is, do you know what your employees are dealing with day in and day out to address their issues? And we had a wonderful gift by our Vice President of Human Resources in our construction business, did it on her own, Paula Simmons, and she went out and did raw footage and met with over a dozen employees and said, what are you dealing with day in and day out so we can understand it? She brought that back, and it brought a whole reality. We showed it in front of all of our HR managers and leaders across the entire company. I've now showed it to our executive leadership team. And I brought two of the stories to share with you. Do you really know what your employees are dealing with day in and day out? So I'm going to share those with you.
I got diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2012. Went through chemotherapy, and my last scan came back no sign of cancer, but after 2 years went by, it came back. So I was in remission for 2 years. It came back in 2014. And this time I had a stem cell transplant. Chemotherapy, stem cell transplant, radiation. My last scan that I had was last Friday. I haven't heard from the doctor, so I'm hoping that my scan came out fine. The first time I was out of work for 6 months.
Okay.
And the second time I was out for probably about 9 months.
Oh, man.
Mm-hmm. I went out in October and I came back in July. And for anybody that's going through it, even if you got family members going through it, I always put your trust in God, because He is the main one that's going to get you through. But you just got to trust and believe. And I think that's the main thing that really got me through, along with my co-workers and my family and my friends.
To start off, when I was in 12 for life, my wife had her first brain surgery. And at the time we were raising my daughter and I was going to school. And since then she has had probably, I think now, a total of 6 brain surgeries. And recently she's had about 4 or 5 back to back over the past 3 months. You know, the hardest part, I guess, is we have 2 little girls. So for a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old to be separated from both parents for 2 months, it's very devastating. It's very hard. My daughter has had some things she's going through. Thankfully, I've had a lot of support with Southwire and the programs that is offered through Southwire, and as a result, I'm able to at least manage a little bit of the chaos. Everybody from my co-workers to my HR to my immediate supervisor to his boss have been very supportive. They've given me the leniency and the fluidity to kind of do what needs to be done. If I need to take a few days off and work from the hospital, I'll do that. If Southwire offers, you know, the power phone was huge. That was huge. I mean, just in food bills at the hospital, that's $100 a week plus. So that was huge for us, and you know, just everybody's support has been great.
And so how's your wife? What's her prognosis?
Well, she's like I said, I'm literally losing count of the amount of surgery she's had, but hopefully she's coming home tonight, which is good for the family, and hopefully we never go back. We'll see how that goes.
Sometimes you don't know when you see someone coming through the turnstile what they're dealing with day in and day out. They could be celebrating a son's graduation. They could be dealing with a wife's illness. Make sure you're connecting. And that is why we are on an onslaught to invest in the emotional intelligence of our leaders. We find that as a huge gap, specifically in empathy and relationship building. And if you're going to be a manufacturer, you have to see things through other people's eyes, and you have to build relationships. And those of you who are successful, you already know this. I'm telling you, I'm preaching to the choir. But we have a Southwire Leadership Academy that's a week-long immersion that's followed up by 2 1.5-day every 6 months to really focus on whole brain thinking. We all have a certain thinking preference, and we need to know, do you adjust your preference to adjust to everyone else's? And do you have empathy? And you can develop emotional intelligence, and there's tools, all sorts of different tools. But we are laser-like focused in those two areas because we have to create a more inclusive environment. And that's our biggest challenge at Southwire. We have to create an environment where everybody from all walks of life can come in, and we refer to it as the whole you. As a leader, are you allowing the whole you to come into work? Is the hearts and minds coming into work? And then we had to get real, saying if we're asking our leaders to lead with emotional intelligence, to have empathy, to build relationship skills, to think with the whole brain, what are we doing as a company? And we looked at our total rewards offerings, and were they really diverse and inclusive? And we found that they weren't. So we're in a third year of our strategy and rolling out some more, but we refer to it as these 6 buckets, and we have sustaining my health and making sure that we do biometrics and making people aware and they get a credit on their premiums if they participate. We had 98% participation rate. We have an on-site medical center and pharmacy that has a more holistic approach to healthcare because 1/3 of our population resides in West Georgia. Then we also look at living my life, my most favorite, because I really like my vacations. But it's about, are we creating the time away from work to recharge and connect with the family? We're putting paternity leave in for our mothers and fathers. We're putting maternity transition leave in the roles that we can for when women come back after having children. We're really looking at, are we being holistic and inclusive? Building my career. Are we really looking at, do we have the career pathways? And that's a big gap for us, and it's something we're going to be focused on in 2018 and 19. Do we have the right benefits to secure my future around life insurance and disability and retirement? And are we educating people of how important it is to have retirement? And we all love to manage my pay, and are we paying competitively? And finally, part of our bringing our whole you is, are we improving the communities? And you heard TJ talk about it with the Power Fund. We have a Power Fund where all of us can voluntarily put money into a 501c, and employees that are going through catastrophic events get catastrophic grants up to $10,000 to help them in that time of need. We have over $1.5 million in reserve right now, and we have over 70% participation rate voluntarily to contribute to that. We also have our Project Give Volunteerism that you can earn a black shirt if you work in more than 2 events. And we set a goal 5 years ago to hit over 800, or more than 10% of our population, and we've already achieved that now. So it's really about a holistic viewpoint. You really have to take a shift. I'm going to transition and close with talking about investing in talent. When you invest in the talent, it's really about, do you see human capital as an expense? And it's a mind shift that I'm trying to, in our companies, to change, is I have an accounting background. And I do not look at human capital as an expense. And we spend hours and weeks and months in our capital expenditures. And we'll spend $100 million in capital expenditures, and it goes through careful planning and decisions and presentations. And we spend $500 million a year in human capital, and we look at it as a blink of an eye. So do you look at human capital as an expense line item on the P&L, or do you look at it as an ongoing investment in your assets? And you have to really think what you do around that. So when we talk about engagement, engagement is up on our metrics boards. It's the safety, the quality, the cost, and the morale of our employees. We are transparent about it, where are we doing well and where aren't we doing well, because we don't always get it right. But the fact that we're talking about it and doing something about it, our employees call us and let us know when we get it wrong. So in investing in our talent, we have a 3-prong approach. We focus on high schools, we focus on post-secondary, and we focus on leadership at Southwire. And I've already talked about leadership at Southwire. I'll share with you one example of a high school program and one example of a post-secondary program. The high school program, how many of you have visited 12 for Life already at Southwire? Some of you have. 12 for Life was an idea born out of our executive for manufacturing, Richard Miller, our Senior Vice President of Construction, and my predecessor and former Executive Vice President of Human Resources, Mike Wiggin. We had a huge issue in Carrollton that our graduation rate for economically disadvantaged kids was at that time 35%. And this was about 10 years ago. And so then we were finding when they did come, they weren't prepared for the workplace. And we require a high school education to work in our manufacturing and distribution centers. And so we created, in partnership with our public school systems, the classroom in a factory. And it's called 12 for Life. The school finds children and gives them an option. Do you want to come and join the 12 for Life? For those that are economically disadvantaged and at risk of dropping out, they work 4 hours in a light manufacturing. It's specifically designed in a standalone facility for children of 16. We're very careful what supervisors come in there because safety of utmost quality. But we have to make sure that they have 4 hours and they're making $9 an hour, which they could not make anywhere else. And we have classrooms, and they spend 4 hours in a classroom. These kids prior to this would go to school all day, then go and work 4 to 8 hours somewhere else, go home, help take care of the children and the family, whether they were own or their siblings, go to bed at midnight, get up, and then get in trouble for falling asleep at school. We have graduated over 1,600 students over the last 10 years, and we just had our 10th anniversary. I can tell you that our economically disadvantaged graduation rate 10 years later is 85%. The reason it works is because it makes a profit, is sustainable, so we don't apologize for that. It also works because we're in partnership with our educational partners in the community. We now have a second facility in Florence, Alabama, and if you haven't heard, Textron, the subsidiary that makes the Easy Go golf carts in Richmond County, they've just announced and opened their first, they call it RPM, Reaching Potential Through Manufacturing, and that's their form of 12 for Life. And Scott Halloran, their president, has the best quote: these children have the capacity and the capability, their circumstances are getting in their way. So I encourage you to reach out to others. We'll be more than happy to host you if you want to come see how it works, and we're trying to be an advocate. The last thing I'm going to share with you, and it's a little, is I stand here where Randy Jackson stood before, and I learned from him how to address the skilled trade gap, so it's a little bittersweet that he's not here with us today. But we were donating money to the technical colleges, and we called it a partnership, and we were not getting the results. And we donated over $1 million, and our skill gap shortage didn't narrow. We are now embarking and adopting what Kia has done around us. We're setting up a dedicated facility. We're just hired our first apprenticeships. We're having a 2-year paid apprenticeship program that will be in a dedicated facility in Southwire, that the West Georgia Technical College will come in and do the curriculum, and they will get certifications that are universal across the state, as well as a specialized Southwire certification, and we will build our own skilled trade. You're going to need to invest in apprenticeships. We have fought it at Southwire. We're finally adopting, and we learned from Kia on how to do that. The last thing I'm going to share with you is a little bit in closing. Is each one of us as a leader, it is not HR's responsibility to engage employees. 12 for Life was born out of a manufacturing idea. Skilled Trade Academy was born out of a manufacturing idea. We, as HR, are your business partners, but all of us as leaders have responsibility for engagement. We all have the plant, the property, and the equipment, but how are you handling your human capital? And are you cultivating an environment where your talent thrives, or are people just punching the time clock? You need to answer that question. Thank you.
Who in here would raise your hand really high if you might be interested in going with us if we were able to work out a tour to Southwire?
To 12 for Life.
12 for Life to see that? Can you see that? You can see that,
I can
right?
see that.
I think we might have a little work ahead of us.
We can do that.
You think we can work that
Yes.
out? All right, great. Well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to present with you an award. Thank you so much for doing this. This has been wonderful, and just a little token of our appreciation for the time that you spent with us today. Thanks. Awesome.
I'll leave it up here.
Well, thanks. See you.